Welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar on Windows Autopilot, the MDM dialogues from A to Z. So we are going to be focusing on autopilot stuff. But yeah, my name's Ben. I'm a systems architect at Patch My PC, so I get the opportunity to deep dive in Config Manager and Intune and play with some stuff. So I'm happy to be here with you today.
Then we switch over to myself. I'm Rudy Holmes. Certifications, I don't have any. I'm the weird guy that looks at DLL files for fun, and sometimes I find them pretty intriguing. And it's a good thing that it's not a webinar about DLLs, otherwise we will be sitting here until tomorrow morning. So we're not going to do that. That's me. Let's move over to our new colleague then.
Yeah, and I like the way. Oh, it just updated because I was Rudy number 2 there for a brief second. Yeah. So my name is Morris Daly. Yeah, certifications. I'm an audit log spy. I like doing stuff with security these days, unlocking people's devices down, which my colleagues love me. Really, they do. Other than that, I'm a Formula One fanatic, and I avoid all things cheese related. And there's a bit of a running theme in this for some strange reason. I don't know where it started.
I'm not sure what the reason is, but something to do with Ben, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't be friends if you don't like cheese.
So I guess we can't be friends.
It's okay. We can still be colleagues, Morris.
Absolutely. All right. So see the agenda for today. We've got a lot of slides here, actually. I just want to say that if we don't get to cover all of the slides, we will have them available afterwards. Okay, so we'll do our best in this 90 minutes. We were looking at the difference.
Yeah, we are not going to start at slide 40 then.
No, we didn't. Yeah, maybe slide 66.
Yeah.
Then we should have time, right?
Then we have enough time.
Yeah, we have 147 slides to get through, people. Only joking. Not that many, but we have a few. But we're going to be talking about the MDM diags, how to dive into them, what the differences are between Autopilot, the traditional way, and the new device preparation profile. Looking deep into logs, how applications get installed, how scripts get run, and stuff like that. So we're excited to have you with us for the next 80-ish minutes. Long time. So without further ado, I think we'll get started. And just on the poll, it's interesting. Just before we get going, I'm really shocked by that, actually. That it's really in favor of Autopilot these days. So this is going to be applicable to basically everyone on the call.
Yeah. And
so do your thing on DLLs. DLLs for the next 60 minutes, people.
That's going to be fun, right? So, well, the MDM logs are here when we do stupid stuff with our device, right?
Or, yeah. When would we want to use this? Why would we want to use it? What is the MDM diag thing?
Normally, when your device ends up in a broken state, you perform an Intune or an Autopilot enrollment. At least Autopilot is just streamlining your Entra enrollment into Intune, and from there on installing the apps. But if something breaks during that process, you want to know why it breaks, how it breaks. And the thing that we have to troubleshoot it, that's the MDM log. So the MDM logs are the ones that's created by Windows itself, or at least we're going to show you a little bit more information about the whole process, but it's just a process that's being kicked off by the MDM client. It gathers all the details we need to know about what the issue is from the device. And if you take a close look at this slide, we will notice a registry key. That registry key holds all the information that the MDM diagnostic tool or the MDM logs are going to collect on the device itself. So in my opinion, it's a pretty important registry key to know because it contains everything that the MDM diagnostic tool will collect for us. Well, okay, then I assume we go to all the logs. Ben,
yeah, line
just
by line.
take a look at every single log.
One by one.
Isn't that the case?
Yeah, this just highlights what you see in the registry, really. Definitely go and take a look at that reg key. You'll get the deck, so you'll see the key. One thing it doesn't show in that registry key is the commands that are run. So the MDM diagnostic will actually run some local commands to pull back information that's useful. And you can see that highlighted in green. So that's pretty interesting. And we will, as we go through these, we'll talk about some of the main ones to focus on. But yeah, this is the full list as it stands.
And you also created a nice PowerShell script to
Yeah,
get some more details, or at least a better output for them instead
it'd
of
be rude not to,
a
wouldn't
list.
it would be rude not to create some PowerShell. Like, I don't know how useful this is. There's a QR code there, but this will just iterate through that key. It will pull out the different areas and what's being collected and output them as a PS custom object. It might be useful, it might not. So yeah, it's
Well,
just a
I
bit of fun, really.
thought it was a cool script the moment you shared it, so it can be pretty useful.
Awesome.
So besides the registry key that we just seen, that holds all the information that is going to be collected once the diagnostic tool is being kicked off, we also have the possibility to add some additional information to that diagnostic log as well. I'm not sure why we should do so, because normally those diagnostic logs contains all the information we need about the enrollment itself, but there could be times that you want to fetch some additional information about a certain cheese app, for example, that has a cheese log in it. You want to make sure that the moment you pull the MDM log from the device, that log is added to that zip file. Well, you can do so by just adding an additional entry in that registry key. It's a simple PowerShell command, so you can ensure or create a platform restriction PowerShell script, remediation script that just creates that key for you, ensures that that information is added to the MDM diagnostic logs. So the moment your enrollment crashes, it is in the MDM diagnostic log. So
yeah, we were chatting before we came on the webinar, like what would you put in there that might be interesting that isn't already collected by the diagnostic log? And
yeah, maybe some licensing diagnostic stuff, or the PSADT, yeah.
In those logs. We back in the day when we found out that the Intune management extension logs folder was collected in its entirety, there was a bit of probing to see, like, well, could I abuse this? Could I put MSIs in there and things? And there were some restrictions, and I don't know whether they apply here as well. So
that's a good question.
Yeah, so if you tell it to collect an MSI or an executable, will it? I don't know.
Or maybe just a zip file with all MSEs and executables compressed. Could be nice to have that information. I'm not sure what to do with it, but yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of people are still putting in, Win32 apps. They've realized they can throw it in there and then just get all the logs back. Makes sense.
Well, yeah, then you have all the apps.
Yeah.
So yeah.
nice.
Again, the MDM diagnostic logs, we can gather them or collect them from Intune itself. We can collect them from the device itself. So thanks, Ben, for creating this nice picture to let us see how we can collect it. So we'll just start with a simple overview how we can do so with Intune. So if we run into a certain issue and we need to collect some diagnostics from the device itself, just open Intune, go to your device, select the device that is running into issues, at least if the device is visible in Intune. But if it's visible in Intune, you can just click on the Collect Diagnostics button. It will prompt you for an additional approval if you're pretty sure if you want to continue. Well, if you don't do that, that makes sense. It doesn't go forward, so we press yes. From there on, you will need our long time, or at least 5-10 minutes, depending on a lot of stuff, which we'll go to show you within a couple of minutes. But normally within like 10-15 minutes, you should be able to fetch the logs by going to the device diagnostics button and just press the 3 dots right there and press download. That's it, pretty simple, at least how I explain it right now in a high overview. But I also posted a blog yesterday about what is really happening when you press that magical button, because a lot of stuff is happening in the background, even when you don't or not certain what's happening. So the moment you press the Collect Diagnostic button, Intune is going to prepare a CSP for the device to be sent over, only when the device checks in, of course. So normally when the device diagnostic CSP is created, the Windows notification service should send out a message to the device, asking it to check in. At least that is something that should happen. But the last couple of weeks, I'm noticing a totally different flow in it. The device isn't checking in as if the Intune, the graph command, is not talking with the Windows notification service to asking to the device to check in. But just forget about that information. I'm hoping that it will get fixed sooner or later. But normally the device should start checking in because push notification is sent to the device. From there on, a new scheduled task will be created, and we discussed it with Ben just before entering this webinar. Not a lot of people are aware of it, but in your task scheduler, there is now also an enterprise MGT non-critical folder. Inside that folder, a new temporary task will be created, the queued schedule created for queued alerts, to ensure that there are no conflicts with other push notifications as well. So that task is scheduled to run 5 minutes in the future. So after 5 minutes of waiting, so don't expect to have the collect of the diagnostics within 10 minutes. You need to wait at least 5 minutes before the device starts syncing. The device needs to sync, the device needs to fetch the CSP, the device needs to execute the whole thing. So it takes a little bit longer, but after 5 minutes, the device will check in. It will receive the diagnostic CSP, and if we take a close look at that diagnostic CSP, we'll find some interesting stuff because it contains the Azure Blob storage with, how do you call it, the ID, so you can just connect to it. And of course, all the information that besides the MDM Diagnostics logs, it needs to collect. So in my opinion, it contains a lot of information, and the moment you run the SyncML tool, you can inspect it for yourself. So the moment the device CSP is sent over to the device, just as I was telling you before, the OMDM client, it's still a weird name in my opinion, but at least it's not the phone provider. The OMDM client will start executing the diagnostic log CSP, and one of the functionalities in it is just executing the MDM Diagnostics tool. It will do so by kicking off the MDM Diagnostics tool with a couple of parameters. So one of the parameters is the input XML that is also sent over to the device. And in my opinion, that input XML is stored in a very weird location because we all know the system temp folder, right? It's the temp folder in Windows. But if you look closer at what this does, it stores it in a system temp folder. A totally different folder. So it just throws everything in one folder, all the diagnostics, all the data it needs to collect, it stores it in one folder. And from there on, the MDM diagnostic tool will compress everything to one zip file, and it will upload the data back to the Azure Blob storage that it got in the CSP. And from there on, the happy IT admin can take a look at the zip file, or at least at the diagnostic log file in Intune itself, and it could start downloading it. Normally, it should take like 10 minutes, but we have seen cases that it takes like 4 or 5 hours. So I would advise for the people that want to collect the diagnostics right now and within 50 minutes, the moment you press collect diagnostics, wait a couple of minutes. From there on, press the sync device button, and again, wait again 10, 50 minutes, maybe 20, and hopefully the diagnostics zip file will be there to download. At least that's what should happen. If you want the whole technical overview, because I'm just spending like 5 or 10 minutes on this topic, I've also created a large blog post with the whole technical flow in it, with all the details that we discussed, or maybe that I missed right now, but just scan the QR code or just go to the link. It will show you all the information you need to understand, in my opinion, what is going to happen when you press that magical button in Intune. So from there on, we have a big zip file with a lot of files, right, Ben?
Too many.
It's, in my opinion, you can't have enough information, they say, right? And for a security guy like Maurice, you have to have information. So from one side of the table, I like it because it shows a lot of information, but it also ensures that you don't know where to start looking, right? Because if you have too much information, it could be difficult to start looking at something. So luckily, if you take a close look at all the files in there, you could also spot the real MDM diagnostic log in it as well, because in that zip file, only the key essential stuff that we need to know about an enrollment or why Autopilot is failing is stored in that zip file. So in a zip file, we find another zip file. It's like an inception ID. You can extract those contents, and you can get everything you need. And one of the most important parts of that zip file is the ETL trace. This ETL traces that shows every time frame, every single step in your enrollment. So the moment you log into your device, the cloud experience host will start logging everything by default. So you don't have to do anything for that. It will kick off the tracing mechanism automatically and will start logging every single step in the process. So in my opinion, looking at this ETL trace is much better than just staying at the shellcore event log itself, because this log tells you way more than you need to know. At least it tells me a lot of information, but you need the Windows Performance Analyzer to open it. And you can get that tool from the Microsoft Store or the Windows Assessment and Deployment Toolkit, but that needs some more installation time. So normally I just go to the Microsoft Store, search for Windows Performance Analyzer, and with that tool, you can open that ETL file. We can do a deep dive session on looking at ETL files, because it's so many information put in one big file. And the more you add, the more it's very difficult to find the information you need if you don't know what you're looking for.
That's why I want Copilot for Intune to be, I've collected MDM Diagnostics of this device. Why did it fail Autopilot?
That will be
that's what AI should be.
Yeah.
Then we're out of a job. Then
there'll always be a job for you, really. I would say as well, when we were playing with this, I just went and had a look at it as well, had a look at the trace. But if your device hasn't been through Autopilot, there's going to be nothing interesting in that diagnostic log CSP. So it just looks like all numbers, and well, there's nothing in here. So,
yeah,
by all means, download and try it, but the ETL might not contain anything meaningful unless it has gone through Autopilot.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the time, just like I was telling before, besides this diagnostics tool of the diagnostic logs, most of the time I send out a WPR file. That's just a config file to the customer, asking to just start WPR start, and the WPR file itself, the config file. In that config file, I defined all the event tracing providers I want to capture, but with debugging mode on, so it logs maybe too much, but exactly in the categories, the flows, and the proper keywords I want. And when the enrollment is done, I just stop the WPR trace, save the ETL file, and that ETL trace is, I'm not going to say it's better, but it's 10,000 times better than the ETL trace in the diagnostics tool. So the diagnostic tool, the logs are, in my opinion, pretty good, but if you want to know more information, you need the tracing yourself. Well, but I guess we can do a deep dive on ETL in the future.
Sounds fun.
And this is your funny slide, Ben.
Yeah, this is my one contribution.
Cheers to that, with water.
It's just if you're going to try and collect the MDM diagnostic log manually, just do it from the right place. If you go from the Access Work or School and hit info, you're just going to get the diag report. So you want to do it from export your management log files. That's it. That's enough to be said for that.
Yeah, well, and so we discussed how to collect the Intune diagnostics from Intune itself, but we can of course do the same, but then from the device, just like the diagnostic CSP is doing. It launches the MDM Diagnostics tool, so almost the same. We can do it, but instead of specifying the Azure Blob storage, we just kick off the MDM diagnostic tool with a couple of parameters. So I'm asking for the device enrollment, the device provisioning, the autopilot. You can also add TPM stuff to it, but it actually does exactly the same thing as Intune does, it will create the zip file, the MDM diagnostic report in the public documents folder. So you can get it from there. So it's a 50-50 from Intune or from the device itself.
Cool.
And another pen slide.
Yeah, this was cool. If you like prodding things, yeah, then there's an executable called strings.exe from sysinternals. Sometimes it can reveal something, what an executable is capable of. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did. So we ran it against the MDM Diagnostics.exe, and it came back and told us there's a switch called clean. And that was quite interesting. So that then opened up the rabbit hole, and we found out there was a scheduled task actually that runs on system startup. It's disabled by default. I'm not too sure when it gets enabled. We didn't go too deep, but that will actually clear out some of the trace files. So when the MDM Diagnostics runs and it creates this trace file in program data, Microsoft Diagnostic Log CSP collectors, that task will clean out those trace files. I mean, if you sit there hammering the collect diagnostics button in the Intune Admin Center, you're just going to get these ETLs build up in that folder. And there's obviously a scenario, I don't know what it is, where Microsoft thought that you'd probably want to clean those down. So I don't know whether, if anybody knows, let us know whether if you go through an autopilot reset, then it enables that task and it cleans them up. I don't know, but that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's very weird. The moment I was looking at, I was also like, there should be an ID behind it. Why Microsoft implemented this idea to clean up the ETL files after the trace, but yeah, not sure, because sometimes I want an older trace or something. I'm not sure, but
maybe there's a time when this trace file, something went catastrophically wrong and it was like 20 or something.
Well, back in the days when I was first playing around with ETL tracing and trying to create my own config file, I ended up with 2 gigabytes of ETL tracing.
Well,
so
it's your
maybe
fault.
Yeah, maybe because with 4 gigabytes of maybe even more, yeah, then that folder will be hammered. So yeah.
Cool.
And they contain a lot of information. Every single event, every single file. And of course, during this presentation, we're going to pick a couple of them and highlighting them, what they are doing and what we can use them for. So
not so long ago, do you remember when you did the MDM Diagnostics and it just pulled down folder numbers and you're like, oh, yeah. I don't know which one.
Yeah. Number 1, number 2, just pick a number. Let's see what's inside. Reminds me of a movie. Just open the door. Let's see what's inside.
It's my door number 3.
Yeah. But I suppose the one thing we didn't really cover at the start, right? Because looking into diagnostics is good, but why are we doing it in the first place? Like, what's the kind of things that break autopilot? Before we start talking about the differences in autopilot V1 versus V2 or whatever way you want to call it this week, but like, I'm just curious in the chat window, for people, if you could put in what your experience has been, most of the things that broke your autopilot experience, right? Because all 3 of us have been consultants throughout our career, right? We've seen that with customers where it's things like firewalls, proxies. They're getting it away. They're blocking URLs and sending the whole thing bananas. Has anyone had issues with? Well, okay, yeah. No, that's you, Ben. I was thinking, has anyone had issues with Office? And then Office. Office is
Office. The built-in Office CSP that is giving people a lot of issues. Yeah, switching over to the Win32 app with Office in it. Yeah.
Exactly. Like if you're just doing autopilot just with Office, happy days. It will more than likely work every time. But if you throw in a couple of Win32 apps, then it's going to start having issues. Yeah, bandwidth and firewall are always the ones that come up. And of course,
SSL inspection stuff. It's
the content inspection. I mean, it's very clear. Microsoft have it quite well documented now that some features do not support this, and if you have it on, you have to have workarounds, right? And it's about getting your security team to allow those URLs. But also the other thing, when you go to the security people and you say, I want a whole bunch of the URLs, IP addresses and everything, oh no, they can typically go no. And then they might ask you to format this in a Excel spreadsheet and send it to them, and they'll do it for you. But you need them to understand where all of this stuff actually comes from originally, because Microsoft changed things. We've seen that at Christmas time, where the change for the PowerShell scripts come up. So there's different endpoints get added in, and if you don't do that, well, then you're going to have this flaky experience. And anyone that used Autopilot way back when it started had a very flaky experience. It's really quite stable today, as long as you do certain rules around it, right?
As long as you don't mess around with it, then.
So what's the difference between Autopilot and Autopilot device preparation?
Are we really going to discuss that right now? It's going to be a funny
I
discussion.
think we should. We should. I think it's
Yeah.
still one of those things that's
Yeah,
We
people are
need to
confused.
highlight the differences. But so, in my opinion, looking at Autopilot and Autopilot device preparation, so I'm not going to call it Autopilot version 2 these days, because I was told not to do that anymore. So
It's
if I
worth
look at-
saying that though, because some people do relate to Autopilot
Yeah.
V2 when we talk about Autopilot DP.
it's very easy to point the difference between Autopilot version 1 and Autopilot version 2. First gen, next gen, how do you call it? But yeah, if you take a look at the naming, Autopilot and Autopilot device preparation, it sounds the same, it smells the same, but it's totally not the same. So in my opinion, looking at Autopilot, Autopilot was built upon the Windows activation stack from Windows XP back in the day. So the moment you turned on your Windows XP device, it needs to do some activation, and the whole Autopilot mechanism was built on top of that. So when your device boots, it will ask login.live.com to ask for credentials, to show them who the device is, to perform some sort of authentication. That's Autopilot. That's why you need a hash. That's what we used to, right? And with Autopilot device preparation, the whole mechanism for activation, it's not built upon that. The moment you are entering your credentials, at that point in time, when you do some authentication on your own personal device, it doesn't matter. It will be enrolled into Autopilot device preparation. At least if you configure the Autopilot device preparation profile, if the user is targeted with that profile, and if you configured everything, then it's going to be Autopilot device preparation. But still, there are some major big changes or differences, right, Maurice?
Yeah, I mean, what's the one thing we also want to do with Autopilot, right? We want to stop people onboarding personal devices, because we don't want anyone
Exactly
going and stealing credentials, getting a device, onboarding it, because then they bypass all the security protection around it. So when you talk about Autopilot device preparation, okay, if we do that, if we block personal enrollment, it's going to break straight away, right? So now, what are we going to do? Well, we need to use a device identifier to identify that device that is allowed to enroll as a quote-unquote corporate device. And in previous years, it was a lot easier because we could just use something like the JSON, right? We had a JSON file, we could drop it in, but that obviously became a bit of an inherent security risk potentially. And blocking devices personal enrollment, you would say that Intune is not a security platform, but unfortunately that thing is, because it lets a device get into your environment in a way that it could be compliant with all your policies. So that's something you need to consider with it. But obviously the device preparation, the nice thing about it is someone technically could go to Best Buy, Walmart, Asda, Tesco, whatever your store is.
Exactly.
Give the serial number to someone in IT and say, hey, add this, and then they can just onboard the device. So
yeah, they don't need to Shift F10 and get the hash and upload the hash. And
it's way easier, simpler to enroll the device or start the enrollment. You don't need to fetch the hash. You don't need to ask the supplier to upload it for you or something like that. So yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right to call out, what's the distinction, Morris? Because the Autopilot, the device provisioning is not device preparation, sorry, is not Autopilot. They are two different things, different sets of policies.
Yeah, in my opinion, you have Autopilot and you have enrollment status page version 2, because the whole mechanism that Autopilot device preparation is now using, it's way better. The logging is way better. The reporting is better. Microsoft and reporting better. That's funny to say, but it's faster, more accurate. At least we have now a report that shows us what's going on. It's better, but still, yeah,
Well,
some.
Yeah, I mean,
it depends.
Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
All right, no, sorry. I was just going to say the other just considerations around it is, okay, so the assignment of apps, then they need to be targeted at the group that you created where the Autopilot devices are being added to. And then when it's the end user experience, right? So with the ESP traditionally has given us, right, we're going to get to, maybe we're going to get the whole way to the desktop. Maybe we get to the second reboot, we get to the user ESP if we haven't blocked it, but eventually we get the desktop. With the device preparation, we're going to get to the screens that we typically thought we were blocking out. So, you know, I'm going to say yes to telemetry, I'm going to accept handwriting recognition, whatever the case may be. Those things come up to the end. So it's not as kind of
Yeah,
a,
you
like
can block that, but it's still not built in.
yeah, it's not built in. And then the other thing is around like the device naming. Okay, that's
Yeah.
also not a feature of it. So, and again, you know, that can be fixed with automation, but it would be nice to have parity at least if we're going from here to there. Let's just make sure all the features are there first. But
Yeah, the
we
same
can
with.
go there about that.
It doesn't support hybrid, but a lot of people are happy that it doesn't support hybrid.
But you
But
say
that's
that.
a totally different.
I
I'm
know
not
that
going to burn my fingers on that one.
we won't go down the hybrid route, but I just happened to
No.
ask in the chat room just to see, because a lot of people have mentioned hybrid is a big problem. And yeah, like I'm not going to say hybrid is easy. It can be easy. Sometimes it can be misunderstandings about certain things. But yeah, hybrid can absolutely be a pain. But let's not go down that rabbit hole right now.
The webinar.
That's a different webinar.
Yeah.
But there are some restrictions, like it's not, you wouldn't just say, right, there's a new thing, I'm going to go and use it. Because there are some, you know, it has to be Windows 11. You know, if you do need Windows 10, maybe you do, I don't know. There's limits. So there's like the maximum of 10 blocking apps you can specify for Autopilot DP. The interesting thing is though, when you read the docs on this, I'll put a link.
Did you read the docs, Ben?
Yeah, I do.
Did I heard it correctly?
I do read the docs.
Yeah.
Most of the time I just ask an AI assistant the answer to something, but I do read the docs sometimes. And they do say that LAB and Win32 apps are supported with Autopilot device preparation and not with Autopilot. So that's quite interesting. So maybe your offices will work from this day forwards if you use Autopilot DP. I'm going to drop a link and we'll probably add it as a resource as well. But this will probably go in like a second in the chat, but that's quite an interesting thing to read.
But before we go to a deep rabbit hole, will we look at the actual flow of it then, how it works?
Yeah, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, well.
Big breath.
Windows 10 screenshots. Yes.
I needed to add it, right? It's legacy, so. But this webinar is about using the MDM diagnostic logs for Autopilot version 1, because with Autopilot device preparation, different set of logs will come in. You need to take a look at the instrument management extension. You need to take a look at the bootstrapper logs. So that's totally different than with Autopilot. So we're going to focus on Autopilot, and in my opinion, it's pretty important that we need to know every single step in the Autopilot phases, because everyone thinks Autopilot is everything combined, but that's not the case, right? Autopilot is just a method to streamline your Entra enrollment and ensuring that your Intune enrollment kicks in and that all your apps and scripts are getting installed. So that's Autopilot. But if you take a look at the Autopilot phases itself, we will notice that we have an Entra join step in the process. So we're going to zoom in to that because you need to know at which step Autopilot can break. So in this example, during the Entra join, if you use TPM attestation when doing white glove pre-provisioning, that step could break at securing your hardware. So we're going to discuss which logs you will need to take a look at that moment. We can do a deep dive on TPM debugging itself. That's even way longer than 1 hour or 2 hours, but we're going to just show you the logs which you should need to take a look at. And from there on, once the Entra join kicked in, normally the device should automatically be enrolled into Intune, and with the Intune enrollment, also the MMPC enrollment should kick in. The MMPC enrollment, that's dual enrollment that is happening nowadays on all the devices, but also that step could break down during the enrollment itself. So we're going to discuss the logs you should need to inspect the moment when your Intune enrollment stops or doesn't get enrolled, because somebody created a policy in Intune that just blocks the whole Intune enrollment itself, which can happen. So from there on, the Intune policies will come down to the device. And one of the Intune policies is, of course, the Intune Management Extension CSP and the Offer CSP. So we're going to talk a little bit about which logs we should inspect if that part is breaking. And of course, if preparing your device for mobile management step is completed, which just tells us the Intune Management Extension is finally installed, it will move over to the device setup and a nice animation. So when a device is moving to the device setup, a lot of stuff can break as well. And we all know that Autopilot and deploying apps can be a pain, right? So like 40% of the time, people will reach out to me that the applications are failing or applications are not being installed. It can be because delivery optimization is not doing its job. Firewalls as well in inspection, wrong detection rules. If you create an app that's not really created in a normal way. So we're going to talk about the certificates. We're going to talk about how to debug application failures in a small time frame. And we're going to talk a little bit about the PowerShell skips and the remediations. And normally when the device setup is completed with Autopilot V1, because we don't have an account setup in Autopilot device preparation anymore, which I'm more than happy to celebrate that, because normally the account setup could break in various ways because a lot of stuff is going on at that phase. So normally I will advise people, if you don't need an account setup phase, just ensure that you just skip it. And there's also a blog on Patch My PC that tells you how to configure the company portal itself. So the moment you log into your device, it will skip the account phase, and from there on, the company portal will automatically boot up and show every status of the device. So it shows you if the device is compliant, it shows you if the apps are getting installed, which is, in my opinion, the same thing that the account phase is doing. So again, hopefully Microsoft is going to ensure that it's a built-in feature, but they announce it at Ignite. But until then, just take a look at the Patch My PC blog. It will show you how to do it yourself, and it works, which is pretty good. So from there on, we're going to just take a step back and just zoom in to every single step we just discussed. So normally, if I am asked to take a look at an issue, I ask them for first some general information about the device, because I want to know the Windows version. Is it a very old Windows build? I want to know the active SID under the user, which user the device belongs to. So first off, I'm going to ask or take a look at the MDM diagnostic logs, and I'm going to open the MDM HTML report itself. It contains some basic information, some advanced information, which we show you later on. But in my opinion, it's an important file in the diagnostic tool, but not that big.
Well, it's a great call, because if you're trying to do Autopilot device preparation, you see it's Windows 10, well, that's your issue. Stop at step 1 instead of getting 50.
Exactly. Yeah. Go get yourself a newer Windows version, something like that. But yeah, normally we all feel the pain that when your device is getting enrolled, at least you think with a Windows Autopilot and you end up with your user being a local administrator. A lot of stuff can happen, but normally with Windows Autopilot version 1, the device isn't recognized as an Autopilot device. So normally if someone approaches me and asks me that question, I just ask them to send me the diagnostic logs. And from there on, I can spot it in like 4 or 5 places if the device is recognized as an Autopilot device. So for example, the modern deployment diagnostics provider, it will just show me that the Autopilot profile can be downloaded. And then one of my most favorite diagnostic tools, or one of the most best contents in that file, is the MDM Diagnostic registry dump. That's a dump of all the important registry files on a device that are important for the Autopilot enrollment or for the Intune enrollment. And we all know that even policies are in fact just a registry key configured somewhere. So also certificates are just encoded registry keys. Everything is in fact just a registry key on the device. So I'm glad that file is part of the whole diagnostic report, because it holds a lot of information. And also, if the device is recognized as an Autopilot device, so if I can spot the error message device is not registered, then I know that's not an Autopilot device at all. And of course, another good event log is the Windows Shell Core event log that shows the same, at least a bit of the same information as the ETL trace we discussed previous, because if we open the Shell Core event log with the Cloud Experience Host event log, that logs every single step in the process, what's happening with the Cloud Experience Host. Of course, you can also take a look at the JavaScript files that contains the same story, but that event log, the Shell Core, is one of the event logs I will look at when I need to debug an Autopilot issue, because we are still talking about Autopilot right now. Because from there on, the device needs to join Entra, and then it's an Entra issue. But one of the first steps, if we do Autopilot, we can choose if we do a pre-provisioning or a user enrollment. If we choose to do a pre-provisioning, like our white glove, one of the most important things we need to know if the device is ready for attestation. So if somehow the device fails to perform attestation because the device needs to show the service that it's trustworthy, we need to inspect the TPM hill info, because that simple TXT file is just an output of the TPM tool, and it shows us if the device is ready for attestation. I also wrote a lot about the topic is ready for attestation, but if it's not ready for attestation, forget pre-provisioning, forget white glove, just use your user enrollment or ask your vendor for new firmware for the TPM, but that's about it. And one other big TXT file I mostly look at is the certrec TXT file that contains the certificate request that is sent over to the attestation enrollment service. So for example, the Dell devices that were having issues with the wipe, with the TPM clearing, that's one of the files I asked for, because that file contained at least an error code. And still, it's an error code. It's better to have something than nothing, but I can start with an error code, and I know where to start looking. It's way more information that I need to look at, but it's an error code, a place to start. So besides that TPM hill info and the certrec utility output, most of the time I'm hoping that another part of the registry is also added to the registry dump. But it feels like a 50-50 if the AK cert store is also added to that file as well. So again, that registry dump is one of the most important files in the diagnostics tools. It contains every single information, log files, error codes. So for example, it also contains if the device has his endorsement key certificate. It's a blob registry key, which you can export with PowerShell to a certificate. So with it, you can determine if the device has his endorsement key certificate, and if it doesn't have his endorsement key certificate, it's not ready for attestation, and pre-provisioning will fail. So if you just forget about the TPM attestation part, we will move on to the Entra join, because the device needs to join Entra before the Intune enrollment. Even with pre-provisioning or white glove, the device needs to join Entra. And one of the most important log files we need to take a look at is the Windows user device registration event log. That log contains if the device fetches could receive the token, and besides that token, it shows us which users are added to the administrator group. So again, if your user is suddenly added to the administrator group and it shouldn't have done that, I will take a look at the user device registration event log, because that event log logs every single step in the Entra join process, at least some stuff, because, for example, the authentication token, the snippet is removed from the log file, which makes sense because it's sensitive information. And sometimes that sensitive information could show us a little bit more, but normally that event log is one I should inspect for the Entra join information. And with the device becoming Entra joined, normally what should happen, I've seen cases where it doesn't happen. So that's worth a different block, but that's still in work in progress. But normally with the automatic enrollment, the device should reach out to the service and should take a look if the MDM enrollment if the MDM scope is configured. If the MDM scope is configured and set to the proper group or set to all, then automatic enrollment is activated in the tenant, and the device should be able to retrieve the MDM URLs. If somehow the device doesn't show the MDM URLs during the user provisioning phase of Autopilot, I'm pretty sure the device will not be Intune enrolled. It just skips the whole process, no ESP, just entering your credential, Entra join, and you're done. No ESP, no Intune enrollment.
Yeah, and
Which is
don't
pretty fun to
assume
see.
that those URLs are fine. You know, I think Morris, you were saying you've seen an instance where somebody had actually changed those.
Yeah,
those
I've seen it where they've changed them or just deleted them. I mean, there is a button which you can't see on the screenshot there, just to hit reset, and they will go back to what they were, and that's problem solved. But yeah, don't mess with these.
Don't mess it. Just add it to a group.
It's worth pointing out as well, because here like the MDM scope is all, which is ideal, right? So then if anyone tries to join, they have to be managed by Intune if they have an Intune license, and if not, well then it'll be blocked, right? So if we had the MDM scope set at some, which didn't contain a group where that user was, but we had all allowed on the device join into Entra, then you would have this kind of situation where the device itself might go through Ubi, come out joined Entra join, but isn't managed by Intune.
And with it not being compliant.
Not being compliant, but that's good. Yeah, that could be a risk as well that you want to try to mitigate against. So by enforcing the fact that all MDM enrolled or assigned users must go through Intune, if they're not licensed, okay, if they're targeted and not licensed, what will happen is the device will initially do the join and then go, oh, I should manage my Intune. Then I go, no, you can't do that, and then it'll remove the join. So it's a better way of doing things.
Good job.
So normally, if the device becomes Intune enrolled or not, one of the first places I'm going to look at if the device has received the certificate. The certificate is used to secure the communication with the service. So if the certificate is not on the device or stored in a different place, something is wrong, something is happening. And one thing is for sure, without a certificate, the device is not able to sync. So one of the places I will start looking is the MDM report again. It will show the Microsoft Intune device certificate, which is required to have a good secure communication with Intune. And of course, lately we have seen the Microsoft Device Management certificate dropping down to devices. That certificate is tied to the MMPC, aka the Declared Configuration Enrollment. So without the certificates on the device, no communication with the service. But if somehow the certificate is not on the device, or the Intune enrollment fails, one of the best event logs to troubleshoot Intune enrollment issues is the Windows Device Management Enterprise Diagnostics Provider Admin event log. With the latest Windows Insider preview builds, this also been separated in multiple categories. So in the latest Windows Insider, you have a specific sync category, enrollment category. So it's more easier to pinpoint where you need to start looking. So if you have a sync issue, you need to take a look at the sync category. If the enrollment is failing, then you can start looking at the enrollment category. So instead of putting everything in one big log, just like they did with the Intune management extension and the app workload log, moving everything to the app workload log for apps. They are going to do the same for the event logs as well. But normally, if the device somehow stops the enrollment, I will start looking at that enterprise diagnostic provider, because if somehow a platform restriction is in place, if people are requiring a certain Windows version, so if I'm enrolling my device with a Windows 10 build, which is pretty old, then a certain device platform restriction will block the enrollment. So one of the best event logs for Intune debugging or policies debugging is this event log. From there on, I'm always going to take a look if the enterprise mobile device ID is configured in the registry. So again, the registry dump, because without that MD configured, no additional enrollment can take place. So no EPM, no device inventory. And of course, Microsoft's plan is to move all policies to MMPC, and that also relies on that MD token to be there, or registry key to be there. So that's one of the things I also check in the registry dump. And
hey, that changes with the, I think you blogged on it recently, Rudy, where that changes and it shouldn't.
Yeah. It doesn't change, but Autopilot was looking at the wrong MD because the moment you enroll your device with Intune, you got the Intune enterprise mobile device ID. But MMPC also has the same ID because it needs to have an ID for the service. But the whole Autopilot mechanism was looking for the wrong key. So it was looking for the MMPC enterprise mobile device ID. And if you have Duo in place, which should need to take a look at the Intune mobile device ID, then it doesn't work. So that's why I always check if the enterprise mobile device ID matches the one in Intune. So that's the registry key I mostly check. And of course, it's pretty important that the device needs to sync. So again, I'm going to take a close look at that same event log, but with Windows Insider Preview again. You have the sync category in place, so it's very easy to spot sync errors. So for example, if the device fails to communicate, a nice error will be shown in the event log, and you can fetch it pretty easy. And of course, besides the event log, the dive report itself shows you the same kind of information. It shows you the last sync time. So if that shows you nothing or some error, well, then you know that you need to go a step back, take a look at the certificates. If those are in place, again, a step back, and so forth on. And of course, with Intune, with the Intune enrollment successful, with the Intune being able to sync, the policies should come down to the device. So again, if somehow mentions the fact that a policy is missing or policies are not coming down to the device during enrollment, I again open that big registry dump. It's really a dump. And that contains all the registry keys I need, because if you take a look at the policy manager current registry key, that key contains all the policies for the device and for the user. So if someone is mentioning that the policy wasn't coming down, that's the key I will check. And of course, that's an Intune policy. We also have the Office CSP policy. So just like we were mentioning a couple of minutes back, if the Office CSP is not sent to the device, because it's not an app, it's a policy that is sent over to the device. And that's one of the biggest reasons why the Office installation could fail. It's a CSP, it's not an app, it's a CSP. But if you need to determine if the Office is getting installed, I will check the same enterprise diagnostics provider, but this time the Autopilot event log, to determine if I can spot the Office CSP being delivered to the device. If it's not going to mention there, then I know Office is not going to be installed. And of course, we have another CSP that is actually doing pretty much the same thing. We have the Intune Management Extension CSP. And again, I'm going to take a closer look at the same event log, because if somehow the Intune Management Extension is failed to be installed, that's one of the first event logs I will check. And of course, I will open again the same registry dump, because a policy, an application, it's all redirected to a registry setting somewhere. So I will check the same registry dump if I can spot the same CSP in there. And normally, if the Intune management extension is installed, you should see a log file in the program files folder or the program data folder. If the Intune management extension folder doesn't show up, well, it's a good chance that the Intune management extension is not installed. And again, you need to take a step back and check out the previous slide. And of course, with the Intune management extension installed, the device moves over from registering your device for mobile device management to the device setup. And in the device setup, it's going to install the certificates, it install the network connections, and maybe the most important part, the application and the PowerShell script delivery. But if I need to zoom in for a second on the certificates, it's, in my opinion, one of the most weirdest places I would start looking if I have an issue with a certificate, because all the certificate information is stored in a weird folder that tells me the WLAN report about the Wi-Fi report. It's, in my opinion, one of the most weird places, but if I open that folder, it contains the whole setutil report with all certificates in it, and most important, if they have the private key attached. If the certificate doesn't have the private key attached, well, then it's pretty unsafe and unsecure, so it's not going to work. And finally, from there on, with the Intune management extension installed, it should perform a web request to the service asking to kick off the Win32 app workload. If somehow you spot this error message in the Intune management extension and you are wondering why the apps are not being deployed to your device, or why the PowerShell scripts are failing, or at least not even try to be installed, you need to check out the Intune management extension log, because if that one fails or tells you that there's a secure channel failure, then that will mean that there is no apps, no scripts. So game over indeed. You can brick your device, it will retry, but it's a clean install. It's also pretty nice.
Oh, that's cool. At least you just added this deck.
Oh,
I didn't know if it was going to turn up or not.
Okay, that's a new one, but yeah.
Well, it's not the prettiest one in there.
But I was just telling all the event logs that we need to troubleshoot the Intune management extension, the app workloads, what we were just referring to, that was moved to a different log file. We can find them in the Intune management extension log files. So the app workload and the Intune management extension log file.
So we're going through Autopilot, and some, we've enrolled okay, and then we get to the point where we're starting to deploy apps, and this is a common thing that we experience at Patch My PC, where sometimes people's apps fail because they're doing some cool stuff with them. So
that's a nice way to say.
Yeah. So there's definitely some log files that you should be focusing on, and kudos to Microsoft, to the Intune team, because they made some changes. I was going to say recently, but it's probably quite a few months ago now.
Yeah.
Where, with this bugbear where everything was in the Intune management extension log. And if anybody's looked at how the Intune management extension handles retry evaluation, and it has its own GRS scheduler where it tracks the retry for required apps, it creates a ton of noise in the Intune management extension log. So whenever you're trying to see, well, what else is going on, you're just blinded by this GRS information, and it was horrid. But step forward into today, they've split it out. So the Intune management extension.log now is really nice and clean to give you information specific to what the IME is doing itself. When we're looking at apps, App Action Processor, if you've come from Config Manager, it's a little bit like the App Intent Eval log. So what is the intent for this application I've deployed to this device? That's a pretty good log file to look at. But app workload.log is now the place you go for things like understanding what the GRS is doing when it's scheduling apps, or if the apps are working or if they're not working. And I didn't highlight it, but agent executor.log is also quite useful. If any of your Win32 apps are using scripted detection or requirement, then the execution of those PowerShell scripts will be recorded in agent executor as well. And that's where you're going to find stuff like, did you sign your detection script, but you haven't installed the certificate on the client, so the client doesn't trust it, and you've got an all-signed PowerShell policy, then yeah, the agent executor is quite a good place to go. But in terms of, if we can go to the next slide, in terms of like, how does I thought this would be quite useful, and we covered this before, but I wanted to bring it back to life. How does the IME process application policy? And so this is still very much applicable to when it's running through Autopilot. Probably not going to dive down the rabbit hole of using blocking apps in your profile. Maybe we could. I mean, blocking apps are interesting. So in even in Autopilot and device preparation in your policy, you can say, well, these apps must be installed before the user logs on, and you can.
Yeah, you also have a best effort mechanism, right? To try
Yeah,
to just do your best.
Yeah, isn't that for white glove and not
Yeah.
Autopilot? No, I still got white glove because I'm old school.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, so the IME can track apps during Autopilot. There's no order, but there is order. There is an order in which it executes it, but you can't define it. So you in your profile you specify how many apps, and so these ones must be installed before the user logs in. And you still track these in the same way. You're still looking at the app workload log, the injury management extension, the agent executor. But essentially the policy is processed, so the policy gets downloaded. The policy reaches the device, and you can see that in the, I think that's now in the app workload log, we see that policy come down. Essentially, the policies gets retrieved as a huge JSON. So any application you're targeting to a device, if you've targeted 20 apps as required, they all get combined to a single JSON policy and ingested and processed. And then the IME is just going to see, well, which ones do I need to track and which ones don't I need to check? So if it finds an app that it does need to process, it's going to check for dependencies first. Do I need anything else here before I do my thing? Then it runs detection rule, whether in this example it's a script, but it could just be a local native detection rule. And then it's going to see if there's any requirements. So it's going to check, is this app applicable to this device? And again, that's going to be tracked in the app workload.log. If we go to the next screen, awesome. So once the IME deems that this app is required, it needs to be installed now, it'll begin the content download phase. So it uses DO. So it reaches out, pulls down the encrypted bin file. Yep.
There is a lot of chat in the chat window there about DO in particular. Like a lot of people are struggling to get it work, or their network team don't like machines talking to each other. I mean, this is the thing.
It's like just humans.
Yeah, I mean,
family.
you've flipped your whole environment on its head, right? So if you're going from configuration manager where you had distribution points, now your distribution point is that thing in the cloud, right? Which means all of a sudden you got all of this huge amount of traffic now kind of come down through your internet connection, right?
Mhm.
And this is where DO kind of comes into its own. I know DO is kind of a more of a in-depth subject. Again, it's kind of one of these things that we could do another webinar on, but I'm curious, is that there's a lot of people here that seem to be struggling with it, and like, okay, let's talk about how many apps do I need as a blocking list, first of all, because everyone that you go to is different. Some might say, well, I only need Office because people get to the desktop, that's the first app tool set they open. And then others will say, no, I need 47 applications installed just in case they click on one of them.
I guess it depends on who you ask that question. The IT pro, the IT security, the CISO, everyone wants something else. And the user just wants Office. He doesn't care about the security tools.
Exactly, right. And the more applications you add in this process that you've got going on here, okay, so it's going to be downloading more, then it's going to be reaching out to the internet rather than reaching to a peer. And then there's going to be inevitability that the risk for the actual process breaking, especially during the ESP phase, is going to be detrimental to your experience, because you might have you want to block continuation on an error because, well, you haven't got everything right. Maybe it allows you to reset, but then again, if you've got enough 47 applications, chances are it might do it again and again and again. So just something to bear in mind, maybe something for a follow-up webinar as well.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah, keep it light, because to your point exactly, you'll end up being your own worst enemy, because you'll say, I want all the apps deployed so that when my user logs in, they're productive. Yeah. But Morris is like, the more apps you deploy, the more chances of it going wrong and you having to reset the thing and start again. So it's like,
try again.
Yeah. There was actually a question as well around deploying security software. But it depends. Like we've seen times where security is deployed during autopilot, and that breaks autopilot. Yeah, so suddenly security agent gets installed, and then it starts enforcing an all-signed script policy. So any scripts you've got that are signed but you don't have the certificate don't work, and everything starts breaking. So definitely, like, get your security software on the device as soon as possible. Definitely check it to make sure it's not going to break any part of the process. But yeah, definitely look at the list of apps you're trying to deploy. And I'm actually quite fond of the idea, you know, of autopilot device preparation only allowing 10 apps.
Yeah,
That feels quite nice.
Most of the companies use that maximum amount of apps. So
just don't be that
Yeah.
person who then decides to put 10 apps inside a zip file and use one PowerShell script to install 10 apps, and that counts as your one
that
app.
sounds like me.
Just put all of them in a WIM file, download the WIM
Yeah.
file, open it up, and go nuts. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, 10 apps actually, because I answered it before even you said it. That's the recommendation that I always had as well. Try to keep it at 10 or less, because you know from experience that seems to be about where after you go above that, you're going to start having issues.
Yeah, but just like also someone was mentioning in the chat, security baselines that also have a big impact on your app deployment that breaks your whole app. It's
Yeah.
funny to see sometimes how much stuff that could break other stuff.
I'm gonna carry on with this flow, but Morris, somebody's asking about DO configuration, and there isn't like this DO works for everything in Intune. Like, it depends on whether your clients are distributed or whether on the LAN. Can you pop a link in the chat on some examples for DO policies to use? That'd be cool.
Yeah. I don't know if you got specific examples. I think we might have some stuff on the MS Endpoint Manager blog. But one of the things actually I am going to do is I'm going to update the DO workbook for KQL. I'm going to try to get Microsoft to implement some of the things in their own workbook, because it might be a little bit useful.
Awesome. Okay, so carrying on. So we got to the stage where we're downloading content. So the IME is able to decrypt the content. It is encrypted, so it knows the detection keys to unencrypt it. Once the content's downloaded and unencrypted, it then gets extracted into a different location, into a staging folder. And then it gets copied again into the C Windows IME cache folder, and that's where the installation actually happens from. So it's like a 3-stage content decompress process. And the app installs. This is all in the app workload log still, so this is still your source of truth. And then we're nearly done now. So once the app carries on, if we go to the next slide, reboot manager checks whether the exit code, what do you want to do with an exit code is 0? Do you want to hard reboot the machine? Probably not. Default is to not do that. Once the app has been deemed successful, detection is reevaluated again to see if it did install. And then a compliance state is stored in JSON format in the registry and then sent off to the Intune service and reports in to say, hey, this was successful. And at some point in the near future, you'll see that reflected in your reports in the Intune Admin Center as well. And that can vary. So it's actually really interesting. I think we do have a blog post on those compliance state rules as well. So as well as looking the app workload.log folder for what's going on, the compliance state rules are stored in the registry under the Intune registry key. If you look for the app GUID, there's a compliance state, and you can decode those to understand, like, why did the app fail. And at the end of all that lovely stuff, you get a toast notification to say, hey, this was all done and it worked fine. So yeah, really, those log files that are shared at the beginning, the app workload.log, the app application processor log, agent executor log, and the Intune management extension are your go-to for app troubleshooting. Over to Morris.
So yeah, all right, we're getting near the end there. All right, so scripts. Scripts are also another thing that we will do in Autopilot, and they can be really useful to do very small things, right? So give you an example. Let's set a compliance policy that says we must be up to date with Defender. Okay, and that compliance policy then gets used by conditional access because we're going to check for compliance. So if we deploy a machine and it arrives at the desktop, what's going to be out of date inevitably? The virus definitions. All right, so there's like a one-liner you can do just to do the updated definitions. And the nice thing about, say, running scripts inside this is they will also run before the applications are installed. So if you need to do anything registry-wise or anything like that, you can throw it in here. Now, there's two different types of way of doing it. One is the platform scripts, or the scripts just as they used to be called. And basically you upload your script, which should be in UTF-8 format, up to Intune, okay, and it'll be encoded. And so if you go into Graph, you'll actually see it. It's in base 64 value. But that script, when it runs, gets temporarily downloaded, which goes into the location there, which is in program files, x86, and then it's executed. Now, the execution of this all happens as well within the IME. So you'll see that the file is downloading, and depending on how you're looking at IME, if you're using CMTrace, you might miss some of the detail. CMTrace is great, the way it formats it, but if you open it in Notepad, you can actually see maybe what some of you didn't realize is that the entire script will be very visible in the IME log.
Yeah, CMTrace breaks after, I think it's 1,000 characters in the line. I think
Yeah,
sort of
something
Yeah.
like that.
So it just doesn't show it. You might see the strings in it at the start, but it won't be very obvious. But Notepad isn't a great log viewer either. So not a lot of people have seen that. But yeah, I mean, you can do stuff like setting BIOS, settings such as secure boot, making sure that that's enabled. Again, it could be something to do with compliance, or even doing things like updating the OneDrive sync agent before the user gets to the desktop, so it doesn't have to launch, realize it needs a new version, then close itself, download, then launch again. So it just means the user experience is a little bit better. So when the scripts run, they also tattoo their details into the registry. So it goes into HK local machine, Microsoft Management Extension, policies, then the GUID. So if it's targeted at the user, you'll see your user GUID, or if it's like 000, it's that system, and then the ID of the script. So there's a screenshot basically outlining what I said there about the fact that the script isn't visible, let's say in CMTrace, where you can see it just kind of one line, it kind of goes across. Whereas if you look at a Notepad there, you can see that's the actual PowerShell script that's behind it. Now, in addition to platform scripts, we also have, again, remediation scripts. So that's anyone that's not using Business Premium. Unfortunately, I've been shouting at Microsoft for a long time because there's a lot of SMBs in Europe who use Business Premium. It's a very affordable SKU, but remediations isn't part of it. But with Proctor Remediations, a great tool. I think we probably use it very creatively, more than Microsoft would ever want us to. But basically, the difference between the platform scripts is they are downloaded, executed, or rerun, then executed and removed. With the platform scripts, they are downloaded because they are on typically a schedule, right? So it might be once a day at this time, it executes. Now, when you upload your scripts, you have a detection and remediation. You don't have to have the remediation. You can just have the detection if you want. So you upload those scripts, and again, they get encoded into base 64. And then when targeted at the device, they get downloaded. Now, the output is in somewhere slightly different. So it's in the Entry Management Extension sidecar policies and scripts and execution and reports. Okay, so the execution will show you what time that particular remediation ran. So if you were to go into Graph and you were to look at the ID of the health script, you will be able to see that that matches what you're seeing there, and it'll give you an execution time. In my experience, the remediation scripts will sometimes misreport in the actual UIs to say how frequently they've last run. Okay, so if you look at it in the registry, you will see definitely when that script ran. Then the reports, if you're doing the right output, for instance, which you should be to kind of help you gauge what actually happened, you will get that in there as well. It's all put into, basically, it's a string which contains a JSON array. And you can expand that out using PowerShell to see, what happened. Did it run successfully? What was the output? There are a couple of things to note around about these scripts. So remediation scripts will run, whether or not they will run during autopilot is timing. Okay, so if you have a mechanism to set something in a particular security application or something like that, but you need to ensure that it is done every single time. That's something that you also need to duplicate then as a platform script. so that it's guaranteed to run it when it runs through Autopilot. If you move on one slide there, please, Rudy.
I was just clicking.
Excellent. All right, and here's just the output. Here we can see that from looking in graph, we get the ID. Then we go into the Intune management extension log. We can see that that ID is listed there. It then starts downloading the PowerShell script, and then the agent executor kicks in to tell it to run the PowerShell.exe with the path to the file. And that's basically what happens. And then we get the output into the registry. A couple of things I will mention about this process, though. Often, if you're doing remediations now, with Autopilot, it really shouldn't matter, because if it did run with an Autopilot, you should get that first result. But if you're running remediation scripts over and over again with a very tight timeline, like say 1 hour is the least you can do, what you will find is in the UI, it won't report that. Okay, my experience. So there are a couple of tricks you can do to basically put in versioning into it. The only exception to that is if you were to go and run the remediation script manually on the device from inside Intune. That will definitely trigger the latest version, because otherwise you could potentially be waiting up to 72 hours for that script to get updated to rerun on the machine, in my experience. Really, if you want to skip on one.
Yeah.
And here we can see the output. So here we have a script that's run. It's said it's successful. And then if we look in the Intune management extension agent, here's what I'm saying. Okay, so here's an example where I am creating a local account. Okay, I'm sure some people have done this. I am going to create a local administrator account, or I'm going to create the Lapse account. I'm going to manage the Lapse account. But for a period of time, it's going to have a password of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, worst case scenario. So that account is sitting there, and if I have access to open an Intune management extension log, I can then see, this script did this, and here's the password. Now, this is a kind of a please don't do this kind of script, but there are other scripts where people have done it for reasons like we all started with log analytics, where we were just having the key in plain text. Again, now if you're running this as a remediation script, what will happen is that won't show any IME. The remediation script will just execute, okay? But the platform script will. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to collect all of my device inventory when the device on board, fair point, you might want that. But then you will have that problem for a period of time. Now, that period of time has got a little bit longer, of course, like because what Ben said, because the IME log used to have a huge amount of churn. Okay, so by time you're finished doing something, what you were looking at a few hours ago was gone. Now, because it's split out, stuff persists longer in that log. So it is something to be aware of. Yeah, and here, here we can see then on this version of the script, it's saying my super secret password is who ate my cheese, and it's created a my user. And again, there we can see the output. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing a custom output into the Intune management extension logs directory, saying I hate cheese, and here's the output of the script. Again, I can collect that.
But we know who ate the cheese, right?
Well, it wasn't me, so
then it should be Ben.
It should be Ben. Ben at the cheese.
Hates cheese.
Yeah. So a couple of just recommendations then around this on the next slide. So include logging functions in your scripts. This is easy. You can rob one off the internet, or you can ask ChatGPT create one. It'll do it, no problem. Considering the version info, like I said, so that if you're doing remediation scripts, at least you know in the output which version of the script it actually ran at that time. Don't share the credentials in there, that kind of stuff, because it's all viewable in plain text. And then watch your encoding, because you see often people do like UTF-8 bomb or something like that, and you get these funny characters, and sometimes the script will execute and sometimes it won't execute properly. So just make sure your encoding settings are correct. Now, some other attention stuff. This has been mentioned actually in the chat window as well, about the automatic collection of logs on failure. Okay, so it is on failure. This can take time. this can actually take a couple of hours after the failure. And what's the one thing that a technician or an end user is going to do when they have a failure? They're just going to go power button or restart, whatever the case may be. And then you won't get the diags. Simple as that. So if you've got technicians doing this, tell them to leave it on for an extended period of time. Next one. Proxies and firewalls. Okay. The Windows notification service may not work with proxies and doesn't work with VPNs and things like that again. So this is something that can interfere with the whole process. And on the diagnostic collection itself, so the diagnostic logs are captured into these locations. Again, think about this, because if you've gone in and just said, oh, here's my Intune URLs and IPs, that's one very small part of the whole picture that's required for firewall, for internet access, and for endpoint access. So make sure these are open depending on where you are.
It's interesting. We launched that poll at the beginning, and so a lot of people are using Autopilot still, and Autopilot device preparation got very low. And I don't know whether part of that is maybe familiarity, like people have built around a process and it kind of works for them and they're sticking with it. But it's interesting, the conversation around, we kind of feel that device preparation is probably something that's going to get a lot more focus in terms of new development. So it's probably worth just start to peek at it at least, even if it doesn't fulfill your world desires today.
All the effort will be put, at least that's how I feel, that's how I think about it, that's how I see it. All new futures will go to Autopilot device preparation. So, but yeah, if Autopilot device preparation is going to support reprovisioning, aka white glove, that's a huge miss for my part. If that's going to be supported, and something that Niaus blogged about, so I'm free to talk about it because Niaus blogged about device association. That was being mentioned in the code. I spotted the same. Niaus blogged about it. So, but if those features are getting shipped, then it's going to be lovely.
Yeah. And I'd be interested, this is probably something we could do in the lab, like the fact that it's clear in the documentation that LOB and Win32 app mixing is supported in Autopilot device preparation. That sounds interesting. I don't know how they track LOB apps, but that might be interesting to probably do a whole webinar on that alone.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of topics we can do a webinar on.
They always, yeah.
Yeah, just saying.
Shall we call it a wrap then? And just thank everybody for coming along. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everybody who
Thanks for your time. Yep.
Thanks presenters. Thanks for people, our moderators as well, and people who put time into making this webinar what it is. See you next time.
See you in the next one.